The Archives Committee is pleased to show a selection of the photos of the Suwannee River at Dowling Park from the late 1800s to today. I've got a Suwannee River flowing through my veins. This song of the early 1900s is pertinent to those of us who live along the river. The pictures you see today are in the archives. In 1999, Dick Grillo wrote a song about the Suwannee River and Dowling Park. He composed both the lyrics and the score. The song is one of a series of songs Dick wrote for the musical production Treasures of the Suwannee. Suwannee County is bounded on three sides by the Suwannee River. The river is 206 miles of swamps, limestone banks, hammocks of hardwood, and salt marshes. There are 55 springs. ACV is at the milepost 113 on the river, or in the middle of the length of the river. Headwaters for the river originate in the Okefenokee Swamp in southern Georgia and flow to the Gulf of Mexico. The Suwannee River is federally designated as a wild river and is said to be the only unspoiled major waterway in the southeastern United States. Over the years, Indians, farmers, woodsmen, planters, and ordinary citizens have called the Suwannee River home. For these people, the Suwannee was black water magic. Today's presentation will deal with the history of the 4 miles of the Suwannee River owned by the Advent Christian Village, and specifically between White Sands to the north of Dowling Park to County Road 250 to the south. Some Indians call the Suwannee crooked black water. The tannic acid formed from decaying palmetto roots and the vegetation causes the water to appear black or the color of tea. The color of the water is the source for the name black water magic. Some Indians use the term Suwannee, meaning echo river. When the Spanish explorers arrived at the river in the 1530s, Timucuan Indians were living on the banks of the river, principally at White Springs. The Suwannee River was the unspoken Indian boundary between the Timucuan Indians on the east and the Apalachee Indians on the west bank. In the late 1800s, people discovered what the Indians knew all along, that sulfur water provides healing for a variety of ailments. White Springs became a booming resort area. The main attraction was the sulfur and mineral waters that locals declared relieved rheumatism, kidney trouble, nervousness, and other ailments. This is Florida's first tourist attraction. A log spring house surrounded the spring until 1903, when Minnie Mosher Jackson built the concrete and coquina wall, still standing along with 4-tiered structure that included treatment rooms, a concession area, and an elevator. with the attraction of the springs, the excellent land that grew Sea Island cotton, and the vast forest resources that provided lumber and the naval stores, and the town of White Springs thrived. All tribes of Indians considered Sulphur Springs to be a sacred healing ground. Warring tribes were said to have put aside their disagreements and weapons and gathered at White Springs to bathe and drink the mineral waters pictured here. In the 1800s, there was just a wagon trail from Live Oak to Dowling Park. Major transportation was on the river. Flat-bottom steamboats, like the 3 states pictured here, carried freight and passengers up and down the river. The steamboat blew its whistle long before it reached the docking site at Dowling Park. When the citizens heard the whistle, they knew to gather by the river to sell their produce and purchase products. In the late 1800s, Thomas Dowling, a lumberman from Live Oak, bought thousands of acres of virgin timberland in Suwannee, Lafayette, and Taylor counties. He built a sawmill at Dowling Park and ran the Live Oak, Perry, and Gulf Railroad to haul the lumber to market. Trees cut upstream were tied together in rafts and floated downstream to the sawmill. Some of the logs would get snagged and sink to the bottom of the river. Today, when the river is low, you may see deadhead loggers at work. They are recovering from the riverbed cypress and pine logs that have been marinating or soaking in the river mud for 100 years. The logs are called wood gold because one log can sell for as much as $3,000. To be a deadhead logger requires special equipment, state certification as a master deadhead logger, a $6,000 a year license fee, and time and danger. The lumber is called heart pine or cypress. The only place on the ACV campus with deadhead cypress is in the home of Edith Deeg. The wood is hard and insect resilient. Deadhead lumber is also in the mansion of computer billionaire Bill Gates and in the corporate offices of the TV show This Old House. There's a controversy between environmentalists, biologists, wildlife officials about removing these logs. In 1974, the state outlawed deadheading, but in 1998, it was again permitted on a limited basis. Today, a remnant of Dowling Park Sawmill remains at the Advent Christian Village. You'll find it by the river behind the Village Cafe. The foundation for the octagonal outdoor eating area at the Village Cafe is built over the building that housed the generator used to draw water from the river to the sawmill. There's a series of steps that lead down to the square walls. Lumber tycoon Thomas Dowling was not to be outdone. He envisioned a resort across the river behind the current Village Cafe. Thus, the Dowling Park Resort Hotel sprouted on the banks of the Suwannee. People from New York to Miami came to the resort to enjoy fishing, hunting, billiards, bowling, bathing in man-made mineral springs, 2 swimming pools, cold and hot water in each hotel room, and good food. A second reminder of the sawmill is this street sign noting the approximate location of the sawmill. Behind a home, 11040 Millsite Lane, was a cistern that held water pumped from the river and 4 foundations for the water tower that serves the mill. The 1906 promotional booklet billed the Dowling Park Hotel and Cottages as the perfect paradise for the sportsman, tourist, and invalid. Note this quote from a flyer. The Grand Resort, way down on the banks of the old Suwannee River, has the most beautiful groves to be found anywhere in Florida. Nature has done a great work in beautifying this spot. The river makes a grand circle around the park, with its huge oaks and cliffs of rock, and almost comes together. The Live Oak and Perry Railroad runs through this spot. You can get off the train exactly in the park, where you'll find the finest sulfur water in the state. To add to the pleasure of this beautiful place, you will find a bathing pool filled with sparkling sulfur water, which together with many other inducements and conveniences will make this a most pleasant resort. This August 30th, 1906 postcard was mailed from Dowling Park. It reads, "We are here for a vacation. We'd be glad if you were with us. Signed, Mark and Ruby." Notice the man talking to a tame deer. On Sunday, families in the Live Oak rode the train to spend the afternoon swimming and fishing at Dowling Park. Then at dusk, they take the last train back home. A family could ride the train for 50 cents round trip from Live Oak. In 1925, a fire of unknown origin destroyed the resort. Today, when you stand behind the Village Cafe and look across the river, and remember that 100 years ago there was a resort across the river. Tim Goyette of Village Properties says that the swimming pool foundation can still be found, and if you snorkel, you'll find china, glassware, and etc. that was swept from the site in the 1928 flood. When Dowling Park's virgin trees were cut, Thomas Dowling sold the property to Richard W. Sears in 1910. Dowling stipulated that 120 acres along the river were to be given to the Advent Christian Church to establish a campground. The campground didn't materialize, but Dr. Burr A.L. Bixler, minister of the Advent Christian Church in Live Oak, envisioned a home for destitute children. In 1913, the American Advent Christian Home and Orphanage was born. 5 children arrived from one family in Lenoir, North Carolina. The next year, retirees came to Dowling Park, establishing the first intergenerational retirement community in Florida. By 1922, the children pictured here lived at the orphanage. The Suwannee River plays a crucial role in the life at Dowling Park, and especially for residents at the Advent Christian Village. Our lives center in the river more than we realize. We take the Suwannee for granted, but for many people, it is the reason that they chose to live here. The river has been a favorite photographic site. Here, Renee Setzer, one of the first children at the home, pauses to enjoy the river. Today, village residents have 4 river overlooks that provide a place for meditation and resting. Residents of Carter and Dowling House often enjoy a marvelous evening river sunset from their apartments. And awaken the next morning to watch the fog rise from the river at sunrise. Our village sits on a 4-mile horseshoe bend in the river. Years ago, children enjoyed riding the inner tubes around this horseshoe bend. They put in at White Sands Beach, ride their tube around the river bend, where the horseshoe almost meets itself. They'd jump out of the river, hightail it across the narrow neck, and jump back into the river. The competition among children was keen to see who could ride the horseshoe the most times during an afternoon. The river was romanticized by photographer A.B. DuBose in this 1908 photo. He entitled the scene, "Love Making on the Old Suwannee River." Pictured are Dr. Bryan, a local doctor at the time, Postmaster Ruby Strickland Gould, who was later elected as mayor of Live Oak, and an unknown lady. Note White Sands in the center of the picture as viewed from downstream. In the early days, boys of the home fished, trapped raccoons, skunks, and rabbits along the river's shoreline. The skins from the animals were sold for the spending money. "40 years ago, the river was a cooling off spot or substitute